Hello, I'm audible. Yeah, hi guys.
हाँ जी, हाँ
Okay,
जी।
I'm Yashwin. Yeah, I'm Yashwin. I'm currently coordinating Bachpan, coordinating R&D department in Bachpan, and also a part of HR department. I go by Dehi pronouns, and I'll be presenting to you this research today. So before we start with the research, let's watch a video first to get the context, like what victim blaming actually is. So I'll be sharing the screen. Let me know if you can see the
Yes,
YouTube
yes,
video.
it's visible.
Okay, I'll be starting.
Did you see what she was wearing? What did she think was going to happen? Why do we treat victims of sexual violence as if they brought it on themselves?
तुम उसे पसंद करती थी तुमने उसके साथ फ्लर्ट किया था and you wanted to have sex with him so it's obvious that you're guilty.
In pre modern times, victims of rape and sexual violence were often blamed and even punished by the state. In medieval Europe, rape was considered to be a woman's fault if she was attractive because her beauty was so overwhelming as to compel men to rape her. Scholars write that in ancient India, Brihaspati prescribed that the defiled and spoiled victim of rape must be covered in ashes and confined to a guarded house for being enjoyed against her will. Even when the first modern laws against rape were drafted in 1860, they included clauses specifically centering a woman's character in a rape case because of the fear that women might make false accusations for some ulterior motive. Unfortunately, we haven't left this mindset in the 1800s. Till 2003, the Indian Evidence Act allowed for a more lenient rape sentence if the victim was immoral. The IPC still uses the term outraging the modesty of a woman to refer to sexual assault. Judges often cite a woman's past sexual history, her drinking habits, her lack of physical resistance, and a close friendship with the accused as evidence that the sex was consensual. And it's not only the legal system that places unfair importance on the victim's character or behavior. News coverage focuses on where the victim was going or who she was with in ways that communicate that she put herself in danger. But where does this mindset come from? Representation of rape victims in Indian films has also contributed to the view that it's the victim who should be ashamed. In our society, a man's tendency to misbehave is taken for granted. Aggressively pursuing crushes, eve teasing, and stalking are seen as trivial or harmless fun for adolescent boys and young men. It's almost treated as a natural rite of passage to release suppressed sexual urges. On the other hand, at around the same age, adolescent girls deal with their first encounters of sexual harassment in public spaces. Family and friends often teach young girls to adjust to this highly distressing violation, not by confronting the perpetrators, but by protecting themselves. We are told to not wear revealing clothes or make eye contact with men or attract unwanted attention from boys. So we grow up believing that if a boy misbehaves, it's our fault for provoking him and failing to protect ourselves. But it's exactly this conditioning that makes us more prone to attacking the victim instead of reflecting on the perpetrator's actions. But here's the thing, India reports an average of 87 rape cases per day, and some estimates say that 90% of sexual violence cases are not even reported. So, not only is sexual violence rampant in our country, but a culture of victim blaming ends up making the shame and stigma of sexual violence the victims rather than the perpetrators. On the other hand, multiple studies have found that a majority of sexual assault cases happen when the perpetrator is known and trusted, showing us that there is no safe environment or proper behavior that prevents sexual violence. It happens to a woman who is dressed modestly or promiscuously, who is sober or drunk, who is inside or out. If there's no right way for a woman to behave, then maybe we finally need to understand that she is not the problem. That's it for our latest video in the
Yeah. So I hope you guys can understand, like you can relate what we are going to talk about today. So wait, I'll be changing the screen. Yeah, I hope you can see the PPT now.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So today we are going to talk about victim blaming, जिसको हिंदी में पीड़ित दोषारोपण भी बोला जाता है. And this is a major topic जो हमें understand करना है, because we are working in an NGO who is dealing with CSA. So we need to understand what language we need to use when we language we you need to use when we are communicating about a victim. So let's understand further. So before I start with the presentation ahead, I just want to give a heads up about the content that is there in the research. So uh, we are talking about victims of sexual assault, rape, victims of CSA, and other negative uh, emotions we are going to talk about, which are which impact the victims of these assaults. So if at any point of time you think that the content or the content is triggering for you, so please take breaks from this presentation. So yeah. And also, before I start, I'll just give you a heads up that all the questions that you have during the research, please note them down, and we'll taking the research the questions at the end of the research presentation. So yeah. So next I'll be moving forward. So before I start with the presentation on victim blaming, I just want to know what you guys believe victim blaming is. So I'll request my friend here to share the link of this. Yeah, in the chat box you can see the link. Please go on that link and open open with this code which is mentioned on your screen, 9541894, and answer the question. The question is, what do you think victim blaming means? Choose a appropriate answer which you believe is right. Let me know once you have answered. Just give a thumbs up so I can move further. Okay, I can see three people have answered. I'll wait for a few minutes. Okay, can can we have around 12 people to answer this? I can see only 9 people have answered out of 25. Okay, so let's see what the majority of people here are going with. Okay, so almost 86% of people have said that they are going with the first option, which is holding the victim responsible for what has happened to them. Yeah, that exactly is what victim blaming means. Holding the perpetrator accountable, that is not victim blaming. And when we talk about encouraging people to be more cautious, so that exactly is not victim blaming, because it's just people are encouraging others to be more cautious, so that cannot be named as victim blaming. But when they bring a victim as an example, then yes, that is victim blaming. So I hope this question was answered. Next we'll be moving forward. So I'll be discussing quickly what is the purpose of being here today. Why are we presenting this research to you guys? So the first and foremost thing is to understand what victim blaming means. Next is that the psychological and cognitive mechanisms that why people choose to blame the victim, we'll be understanding that. Next we'll be talking about some social and cultural factors जो कि contribute करते हैं victim blaming को, which are there in the society and also present culturally. Next हम जानेंगे what is the impact of victim blaming on victims, और हम ये भी जानेंगे that what is the role of victim blaming in injustice and inequality. Like we have seen in the presentation, you'll be seeing how injustice and inequality occurs due to victim blaming. Next we'll be talking about a few of strategies कि हम as a as an organization working for CSA, how we can be informed about victim blaming and how we can reduce victim blaming. नेक्स्ट विल बी टॉकिंग अबाउट मीडिया रिप्रेजेंटेशंस एज वेल, जो कि विक्टिम्स के बारे में की जाती है, विच directly relates to victim blaming. And the major point is to raise awareness related to victim blaming and how we as a society can reduce blaming the victims. So that was about the purpose, and the contents will be like these. So first we'll be talking about forms of victim blaming, then the historical context जो कि है victim blaming का, then the psychological dimensions where we'll be talking about the psychology behind blaming the victim and also how victims are impacted because of that psychology. Next we'll be talking about social and cultural factors, then we'll be seeing how in the presence of, in the legal frameworks in the institution, how are the institutions responses relate to, victim blaming. Then we'll be talking about some specific populations, like in the sense that how victim blaming impacts the specific populations and how why victim blaming is prevalent in those populations. So we'll be seeing that. Next we'll be talking about language which we use around assault, that also relates to victim blaming and how we as a society can have more accountability focused language around assault. Next and the last topic is prevention and intervention, how we can prevent victim blaming. So I'll be moving further and I'll be asking everyone uh, a few questions. I want to know what do you guys think what victim is, just to be sure that everyone knows what victim is. So can any one of you explain what, like, who is a victim or peerit? Any one of you?
The one who suffers.
Yeah, that is right. A victim is a person जिसको harm पहुंचा होता है, जो जिसको injury हुई because of some accident or a crime against them. Yeah, so that is a victim or a पीड़ित. So now I want to know what who is a perpetrator. अपराधी कौन होता है?
The one who has committed the crime against the victim.
या दैट इज राइट. परपेट्रेटर या अपराधी वो होता है जिसने कुछ क्राइम या फिर कुछ नेगेटिव थिंग करी होती है जिससे कि पीड़ित जो विक्टिम है उसको हार्म पहुंचा होता है. इट कैन बी वायलेंस और हरासमेंट. So that is a perpetrator and a victim. I hope these both words are clear to you guys, as moving forward we'll be discussing related to them only. So next again I'll be asking my friend to uh, share the link to that question, and please join with this code and answer the following question: who can we blame for the act of wrongdoing or assault? हम किसको ब्लेम कर सकते हैं फॉर द एक्ट ऑफ रॉन्ग डूइंग और जो असॉल्ट जो हुआ है? The options are the perpetrator who committed the act, the victim for not preventing it, society for enabling harmful behaviors, circumstances and external influences, or the lack of strict laws and enforcement. Once you're done, let me know. The link to the question is there in the chat box, and please join with that code. I can see 5 people have answered. Okay, we'll be moving forward. So let's see who can we blame for the act of wrongdoing. So, 89% of you have answered that the perpetrator who committed the act should be blamed for the act of wrongdoing, and that is right. We should blame the perpetrator who has committed the act. And some of you have said that society for enabling harmful behaviors or the lack of strict laws and enforcement, इनको भी हमें blame करना चाहिए for the act of wrongdoing or assault. So let's understand this, that जो भी एक्ट कमिट हुआ है उसका ब्लेम हमें अपराधी और परपेट्रेटर को ही करना है, को ही करना चाहिए. The perpetrator or अपराधी who committed the act should be blamed for the wrongdoing or assault. जब हम ब्लेम करते हैं सोसाइटी या सर्कमस्टांसेस या लीगल सिस्टम्स को टू इनेबल दैट क्राइम, या फिर टू कंट्रीब्यूट, जिन्होंने कंट्रीब्यूट किया होता है इनडायरेक्टली, we all know that they have like contributed to the assault indirectly, but we should not blame them, because when we blame the society, the circumstances, or the legal system, we are basically taking away the blame which is required to be put in the laps of a perpetrator. We are taking away that blame, and we are basically, diminishing the blame from that perpetrator, and we are basically blaming the other things surrounding that perpetrator, which is wrong. And this is the first thing जिसकी वजह से हम we end up blaming the victims as well. So I'll read it. While society, circumstances, and legal systems may contribute to enabling harmful behaviors, the ultimate responsibility lies with the individual who chooses to commit the act. Victims should never be blamed for not preventing an assault, as the responsibility of harm always rests with the perpetrator. I hope we are aware about like how, like who we need to blame if an act of wrongdoing has happened. Next, we'll be moving forward, and I'll be quickly explaining what victim blaming is. So, victim blaming is basically when we, hold the victim responsible for the negative event that has happened to them. So, that is what victim blaming is. Blaming the victim refers to the tendency to hold victims responsible. It can be done partially or fully, but even partially when we do victim blaming, like we partially we hold them responsible, that is also victim blaming only. It is a harmful social phenomena. Like we see this in society whenever there's a there's a news about some assault which has happened. We see the normal conversations that goes around the assault. We see that, we see victim blaming in those conversations. So this is a harmful social phenomena. And this victim blaming can happen in many forms as well. We'll be discussing them further, but to give you a gist, it's like questioning the victim's actions or the choices that they made, या फिर उनका behavior पे question करना कि वो क्या कर रहे थे उससे assault से पहले. That all basically forms up victim blaming. एंड ये जो फिनोमिना है विक्टिम ब्लेमिंग का, ये डीपली रूटेड है इन आवर सोसाइटी. बट we as a society hold the power to change this deeply rooted phenomena, and we can end victim blaming. So next, I'll be discussing a few examples of victim blaming. I hope most of you must be aware about these examples, as these are from the mythology or the real life examples as well. So I wanna ask you guys how these victims relate to the basically these what these victims face that relates to victim blaming. I want to discuss that further. So the first one is Medusa. So Medusa is basically a woman was a beautiful woman in Greek mythology, and what she faced. Anyone wanna explain what kind of thing she faced and how it relates to victim? Yeah, anyone? Yes, Neha.
लाइक मेड्यूसा के पीछे ये स्टोरी थी कि जो मेड्यूसा थी वो जिनकी पूजा करती थी वो उनसे जेलस थी उनकी ब्यूटी को लेके। और जब उन्होंने मतलब जो प्रीस्ट बनी थी उसमें मंदिर में जिस की वो पूजा करती थी, तो मंदिर में ना लोग उनकी खूबसूरती को देखने आते थे और उनको प्रेस करने आते थे। तो एक बार क्या होता है, ऐसे ही जो उनके मेड्यूसा के पीछे जो पागल था इंसान, मतलब लाइक जो भी उनको वैसे
Poseidon.
नजरों से
Mhm.
हाँ, हाँ, जो भी था लाइक मुझे ऐसा नाम याद नहीं है। तो वो क्या करता है लाइक उनको फ़ोर्सफुली उनके साथ इंटीमेट होता है, मतलब जो भी था वो उनके साथ रेप होता है बेसिकली। फिर भी उनको सुसाइड मतलब जो उनकी जो थी जिनकी वो पूजा करती थी, उन्होंने उनको आके नहीं बचाया था, किसी ने उनको नहीं बचाया था। इनफैक्ट उन्होंने उनको कर्ज़ दे दिया था।
Yeah, that is
मतलब
totally right. Yeah. Thank you, Sneha. So Medusa, जैसा कि स्नेहा ने बताया, so Medusa was a beautiful woman in Greek mythology, and she was basically blamed. She faced victim blaming when she was blamed for the rape that has happened to her. So she was raped by Poseidon in Athena's temple, and Athena blamed her, and she basically cursed her and turned her into a gorgon. So that is how Medusa faced victim blaming. Next, we'll be moving forward to our next example. This is from Hindu mythology, Sita from Ramayana, and I'll be sharing how she faced a victim blaming. So, as you guys are aware, that she was kidnapped by Ravan, and Sita was rescued by Ram, her husband. But like when she was kidnapped and after she was rescued, the society and her husband basically doubted her purity, so she had to go through Agni Pariksha is basically trial by fire, and to basically prove her chastity. Yeah, so she had to go through Agni Pariksha, but even after going through Agni Pariksha, she was banished from the society. She was banished from her empire, and she was forced to live in a forest. So that is how she faced victim blaming, as she was the victim of kidnapping which has happened to her. She was blamed for that kidnapping, and she was doubted basically. So doubting the victim is also an act of uh, victim blaming. So next we'll be talking about Draupadi. This is from Mahabharata. So Draupadi, as you guys are aware, that Draupadi was humiliated in the royal court as she was gambled away by her husband Yudhishthir. So she was nearly stripped by the Kauravas, and after all this act, she was blamed that she was basically blamed and reasoned that because of her outspokenness and her laughter on Duryodhan, that is why she faced this thing. So this is why she faced victim blaming, and also how she relates to our research here. And next we'll be talking about Eve from Adam and Eve. This is basically from from Christian mythology, and she basically faced victim blaming as she was basically blamed for humanity's fall, because basically she ate an apple and she gave that apple to Adam. So that is how she faced victim blaming. That basically the she was blamed for humanity's fall. Uh, that is how she relates to our research. So that was a quick uh, discussion about the examples of examples of victim blaming. Next we'll be talking about the forms of victim blaming. So how many, like how there are different forms of victim blaming. I'll be just quickly covering a few of them which I have covered in the research as well. So the first one is explicit blaming. So explicit, as the name suggests, कि हम explicitly blame कर रहे हैं victim को. Explicit blaming is basically directly सारा का सारा blame of the event that has happened, वो पूरा का पूरा हम victim के ऊपर drop कर देते हैं. So that is how explicit blaming happens, and इसमें आपको कुछ ऐसी statement सुनने को मिलती है that उनको वहां पे होना ही नहीं चाहिए था at the first place. So that is how explicit blaming occurs. Next is minimization. So minimization is another form of victim blaming. जब हम बेसिकली जो ट्रॉमा जो विक्टिम ने फेस किया होता है, हम उसको डाउन प्ले करते हैं, बेसिकली हम उसको कम समझते हैं कि लाइक वो जो ट्रॉमा है दैट इज लाइक इतना भी कुछ बड़ा नहीं है। सो दैट इज हाउ वी डाउन प्ले द ट्रॉमा। एंड इसमें आपको कुछ ऐसा सुनने को मिलता है कि इतना भी कुछ सीरियस नहीं था जो इवेंट हुआ, दैट वाजंट दैट सीरियस। So that is how minimization occurs. Next is perpetrator excusing. So this is another kind of victim blaming, where जब हम justify करने लग जाते हैं कि अटैकर ने जो assault किया, अटैकर ने जो जो victim के साथ किया, how, like when we start justifying it, we basically are blaming the victim. And इसमें आपको कुछ ऐसी statements सुनने को मिलती हैं that क्योंकि वो ड्रंक थे इसकी वजह से वो, लाइक बेसिकली ड्रंक थे इसकी वजह से वो हो गया, या फिर they were just drunk, they didn't mean it. So that is how perpetrator excusing occurs, and which is another form of victim blaming. Next is situational blaming. So situational blaming is basically when a victim is being faced in through a situation, और जब हम situation में मान के उनको blame करते हैं, so that is situational blaming. सो सिचुएशनल ब्लेमिंग में हम बेसिकली विक्टिम का बिहेवियर, विक्टिम की क्लोथिंग और इन सारी चीज़ों पे क्वेश्चन करते हैं, एंड हमें कुछ ऐसा सुनने को मिलता है कि उनको वहां पे होना ही नहीं चाहिए था, या फिर उनको वो चीज़ पहननी ही नहीं चाहिए थी एट द फर्स्ट प्लेस। सो दैट इज हाउ विक्टिम ब्लेमिंग अकर्स। Next is just world fallacy. Just world fallacy is related to how the psychology of people, basically it is related to psychology of people. So there are many people who believe in just world, and they basically assume that the world is fair, and जो भी गलत चीज होगी वो गलत लोगों के साथ ही होती है। So that is what just world fallacy is. And even like अगर लोग ऐसी सोच रखते हैं, so वो ऐसे कुछ स्टेटमेंट पास करते हैं कि बैड थिंग्स ओनली हैपन टू बैड पीपल, एंड दैट इज अनदर फॉर्म ऑफ विक्टिम ब्लेमिंग। So these were a few examples and types of victim blaming, कि victim blaming किस फॉर्म में हो सकती है। Next we'll be moving forward, and I'll be asking you what, yeah, wait, yeah, basically I'll ask you guys to again go to that website and write this code 9541894 and answer the following questions. So the question is, which of the following is an example of victim blaming? So there are a few examples which are given here, so choose the correct option, like what you think is an example of victim blaming. Once you're done, just let me know by giving a thumbs up. Yeah, let's see how the public here is going with which is the right example for them. So 88% of you are going with that they should not have been out so late at night, which is totally right. So this is an example of victim blaming. जब हम blame करें, this is basically situational blaming कि उनको इतनी रात को वहां पे नहीं होना चाहिए था. So that is situational blaming. uh, some of you have some of you have selected this option, that advising someone to avoid walking alone at night. That is not, that is not victim blaming, as it's just an advice. We are just, someone is just advising others to not walk alone at night. But if they include an example here of some victim, then of course it will be basically another example of victim blaming. Just advising someone is not an example of victim blaming. So I hope this was clear. Next, we'll be moving forward to historical context. So I'll be explaining you key in history, how we can see, you know, the we will be going through the different eras and how we can see the gist of victim blaming in these eras. So the first one is ancient and classical period. So in ancient and classical periods, basically we can see the Code of Hammurabi. So this is the first. This was basically the first oldest legal codes that there was in the history. Is and this legal code, may we can see there were like they had pretty much victim blaming tendencies. So there was a legal legal documents थे उसमें काफी ज्यादा लिखा हुआ था that the जो भी assault हुआ है, if there is an assault has happened, sexual assault, then the you know then the victim had to prove that they resisted to it basically. So that is how the Code of Hammurabi had the just the reflection of victim blaming. Next we'll be talking about Roman laws. So in this period we can see Roman laws which were highly influenced by patriarchal values. And basically if a woman was assaulted, she had to prove her innocence, that basically she did not enjoy it. So yeah, that is how the ancient and classical period had the you know uh, was related to victim blaming. Next, we'll be talking about medieval period. So in medieval period, we see there was a huge Christian influence. So and as we have already discussed the uh, Christian mythological example of Adam and Eve, and how Eve was blamed for humanity's fall. We see that the जो biblical story थी of Eve, it influenced people to believe that women are more likely to provoke immoral acts. So that is how blame of the if something had happened, so blame was put on the woman first. Next, we see feudal societies. Feudal societies are basically they were highly influenced by the honor and reputation. So, जो like in उनकी society का honor was put on to the honor of women and her sexual purity. So if there was a act of assault towards the woman, then the whole of the family's honor was put to question rather than the crime which has been committed against her. So that is how we can relate feudal societies to victim blaming. And we also see medieval Europe. So in medieval Europe, the rape was basically considered to be a woman's fault if she was attractive. So basically, as we also see in the story, how she narrates the medieval Europe. So the rape was considered basically woman's fault if she was pretty, and that she basically lured the men to rape her. So that was about medieval period. Next we'll be talking about early modern period. So in our early modern period, we see there was a shift towards rationalism in the legal reforms. So basically we see that more of the legal system in this period was influenced by evidence based approach. They were basically shifting towards evidence based approach of law and morality. But we can still see that they still persisted victim blaming in their legal systems. Next we will discuss in this period that the colonial law, which was which had the tendencies to blame the victims attitudes and blaming the marginalized societies as well. So they had the tendency, but even after the colonies gained freedom from Britishers, they still had these laws in place which were blaming the victim. And talking about India, so basically the first modern laws against rape were drafted in 1860s, and they had specific clauses against like centering a woman's character in a rape case. Basically they were like they were fearing that if they like women had to prove her character basically in the legal system, and they feared that women might make false accusations for some ulterior motive if they were not blamed for that. So that is how we see in early modern period. Next, it will be talking about 19th and early 20th centuries. So in this period we see uh, yeah, in this period we see the concept of fallen women. So fallen women is basically uh, a concept related to a Victorian era. So in this period, uh, basically women were considered fallen women if if they engaged in extramarital or premarital sex, whether it was consensual or not. So this basically reinforced the idea of victim blaming, that even if it was consensual or not consensual, even if they had been engaged in that act, they are fallen women. So and next, in this period only we see early forensic psychology, which basically which contributed towards victim blaming in a sense that if there was basically if sexual violence has happened, so they considered that the victims were psychologically predisposed to certain behaviors which led to their assault. 2 minute. Yeah, sorry about that. So next we'll be talking about mid 20th century, where we see the rise of feminist critique. So there we see feminist movement happening, second wave feminism, which challenged the victim blaming in the cases of sexual violence and domestic abuse. They challenged that the victim should not be blamed if something negative has happened to them. And to respond to this feminist critique, the jurisdictions in that time period, they formed new rape shield laws, which basically limited the defense lawyers to in bringing the past of the victims. So that's what we see the change in the legal reforms in this period surrounding the victim blaming. And the last one is the late 20th and early 21st century. In this period we see many international organizations being in place and fighting for the rights of everyone in the world, international human rights basically. And they basically formed a UN convention to fight against the discrimination against women, which basically condemned victim blaming and called for a global action to protect victims of violence and abuse. Yeah, so that was about the historical context of this victim blaming. Next, we'll be moving forward to the psychological theories. So these are the basically theories which relate to victim blaming and how people uh, end up blaming the victim. So the first one is just world hypothesis. So just world hypothesis was basically given by Melvin Lerner. So he basically explained that people who believe that the world is fair, like basically he gave the statement that good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people. People who believe in this particular statement, that bad thing happen to bad people, they end up blaming the victim. And they basically blame that the person who is a victim was bad, that's why that thing has happened to them. So this is what just world hypothesis means. Next, it's attribution theory. Attribution theory was given by Fritz Hader, and he explains in this theory that how people assign causes of the events, uh, how people conclude causes of events. So basically, they basically why if a sexual violence act of sexual violence has occurred, how will people conclude it? That's what means attribution theory. So there are basically two kinds of attribution he explained in this theory: that internal attribution. So in people who are more influenced with internal attribution, they tend to blame the victim's personality or traits or the behavior of the victim. And people who tend to go with the external attribution, they blame the external circumstances, and they also blame the perpetrator who caused that particular incident. So that was about attribution theory. Next is differentive attribution theory. So this is basically defensive attribution theory is basically people blame the victims to protect themselves from feeling vulnerable. So basically they are they distance themselves from the victims because they are victims are pretty much similar to them. That's why they basically distance themselves from the victim, and they start blaming the victim for that particular assault. So that was about defensive attribution theory. Next, it's next we'll be discussing about cognitive biases, which contribute to victim blaming. So there are basically three biases which humans have, which basically make them blame the victim. So the first one is confirmation bias. So confirmation bias is basically that when people seek information to support basically something that they already believe. So confirmation bias is that. So you know and when they tend to have this bias, they basically go that an example of this particular bias is that she was careless, so she must be at fault. So that is what confirmation bias is. Next is hindsight bias. So hindsight bias is basically when people think that some event is predictable. So when people think that some event is predictable, they blame the victim that why the victim did not predict this particular thing, that if they are out at night, so this was bound to happen. Wait a minute. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, and the third one is the optimism bias. So optimism bias is basically when people believe that bad things happen to, like, bad things cannot happen to us, because like basically they have this optimistic view towards life, and they think that bad things cannot happen to us. So that's why they blame the victim, and they basically uh, s- state something like, I would not have made that mistake, because yeah. So basically that is what optimism bias is. So this was about cognitive biases. Next, it's related to personality traits as well. So people who believe in the just world, they tend to, just world is the basically the hypothesis that we discussed earlier. So people who believe in just world, they tend to blame the victims of victims of negative events. Next, it's low empathy. So people who have low empathy, they tend to blame the victim, as they are basically basically they distance themselves from the victim and they blame the victim. uh, yeah. And the last one is cognitive closure. So people who are already feeling bad about the victim, they want simple explanations about the event that has happened. They basically blame the victim because they want cognitive closure. So that was about the personality traits, uh, and also the psychological theories which are related to victim blaming and why people end up blaming the victim. So I hope this topic was pretty much clear to everyone. Next, we'll be talking about the mental health consequences, जो कि basically the impact of victim blaming on victims. So the first one is increased trauma and PTSD. Depression and anxiety is increased when victims are blamed for their own assault. Next is shame and self blame. When the society is already blaming them, they also tend to blame themselves, and there's pretty much extreme shame that they face while as the society is blaming them, then they also have suicidal thoughts when they are blamed for their own assault. Next, we'll be talking about perpetrator psychology. In perpetrator psychology, we'll be seeing why the perpetrator end up blaming the victim. Perpetrator, as you all know, that perpetrator is the person who has committed the act, who has done the wrong, who has done the assault. So the first one is denial of responsibility. So basically, to deny the responsibility of the event or the assault that he or she has caused. To deny that, they blame the victim. That something related to victim, they blame all the act of that towards on the victim only. Next is moral disengagement. So in moral disengagement is basically they dehumanize the victim, and they justify themselves why they did what they did. The third one is self-serving bias. This is another bias that we see in perpetrators mainly, that they believe that their actions are justified, and that is what self-serving bias is. So they engage in victim blaming to you know believe that their actions were justified. The fourth one is dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is basically reframing the events जो कि हुए होते हैं, like they explain the events जो कि explain the events or the assault which has happened in a way which basically protect their image. So that is cognitive dissonance, and when they are protecting their own image, they blame the victim. The fourth one is power and control. So basically, to assert dominance and to excuse the actions, they blame the victim. So that is how that was all related to the psychological aspect of victim blaming. So we have covered that. Next, we'll be talking about the social and cultural factors. So the social and cultural factors we'll be talking about. uh, Next, we'll be talking about social and cultural factors. So the first one is gender roles and stereotypes. So in society, in culturally, and even in the society, we have set standards of stereotypes and gender roles which are there in place. And there are traditional expectations of masculinity, which is basically strong and aggressive. And there are also traditional expectations of femininity, which is basically modesty and submissive nature. So all of these, you know when an assault occurs, when they believe in these stereotypes, they basically blame the victims who are basically of the submissive nature. Next, we'll be talking about religious teachings and morality norms. In this particular, when as basically the religious teachings, as maybe you have seen religious teachings and the morality norms that there are in the society, they like basically they put more pressure on purity and modesty, especially for women. And when they put this purity and modesty expectations towards the women, uh, they start basically they start blaming the victims if anything bad happens to them, that they did not protect themselves in a way which also protected their purity and modesty. And they also and some of the teachings also believe that the suffering is a divine punishment, and when they say that, they blame the victim. So, and the third one is societal norms and collective identity. So collective identity is basically related to honor cultures. So cultures who believe in honor honor cultures, basically they pressure their victims to stay silent, and they end up blaming the victim so that the victim uh, you know will not you know uh, raise voice against the assault which has happened. And when they do that, they are basically protecting their reputation, their honor, their culture's honor over the justice which is required for that victim. So that's the third one. The fourth one is economic and power dynamics. So this is basically related to people of the low income group. So people from that, basically they are financially dependent on others. Not just low income group, also the people who are financially dependent on others. If something bad has happened, or if something bad has happened to them, they basically uh, you know blame that particular victim incident on their on them, on the victims, for staying in that abusive situations. So abusive situations are basically nothing but the financial dependency. And we also see power dynamics in the workplace. So if a case of harassment has happened at workplace, victims are, blamed, and they are basically seen as overreacting. And also they end up not speaking up for themselves, and of the assault that has happened at the workplace. And the next is media and legal systems. So social and cultural factors also influence media and the legal systems. So media representations of the victim, when the media focus on the victim's behavior or the past or the clothing, like take any of the news reporting related to an assault, they will be talking about what the victim was doing, where the victim was, and what she was wearing, what he was wearing, what he was doing. So all of these focus on the victim's behavior, they end up blaming the victim. And also, the legal systems place the burden of proof on victims only, that they need to prove uh, if something has happened. So that is how media and legal systems end up blaming the victim. Next, we'll be talking about, as we have seen in legal aspect, we'll be talking in depth how the legal and institutional responses end up blaming the victim only. So the first one is criminal justice system. So basically, think of it that an incident has happened, and the basically there is examination is going on in the court, and the courtroom practices that we see in the legal system, in the court, they basically target the victim's character, जो victim ने पहना था, या victim की history, victim की history in the sense the sexual history or the actions of the victims. They basically cross examine in that way, and that basically relates to victim blaming. That they basically focus that it was victim's behavior that that basically influence the perpetrator to assault them. The next one is legal defenses. So they put the they basically put the uh, burden of proof on the victims only. That is how legal systems blame the victim. Even the law enforcement attitudes, when the like law enforcement attitudes, or basically the police, how the police investigates, how the police reports their basically reports something related to the assault, they are highly influenced by the biases that there are in the society related to the victim, which is nothing but victim blaming. Yeah, so this was about the criminal justice system. Next, we'll be talking about institutional responses. Basically, institutional blame, how the institution different institutions blame their victims. So the first one is schools. So in schools, we see that there is dress codes and behavior policies. Basically, there are behavior policies in place, dress codes in place. So if anything bad happens, they blame their victims related to these behavioral expectations. That if the person was not behaving as the expectations, they are to be blamed. Next, we'll be talking about workplaces. So workplaces is basically as we already discussed, if a harassment occurs at workplace, they basically silence their victims, and they basically silence their victims, and they put more pressure on the job loss than the then take their complaints about the assault. Next is religious organizations. So religious organizations are basically how they justify the abuse with their moral teachings, and how they shame their victims, instead of facing the instead of basically taking accountability on the perpetrators. That's how they blame their victims. So this was all about the legal and institutional responses. I hope this particular topic is clear to you guys. Next, we'll be talking about victim blaming related to specific populations. So in this part of the presentation, I'll be discussing ki how why victim blaming is prevalent in when talking about specific populations. So the first one is victim blaming in sexual assault cases. So we like victim blaming is obviously prevalent in sexual assault cases, but we need I'll be discussing why it is prevalent. So the first one is societal attitude. So because of societal attitudes, the victim blaming is prevalent in sexual assault cases. Next is media representations. So media representation, how the media represents the act which has happened against the victim, how the victim's actions, victim behavior, what the victim was wearing, all of these are represented in the media. How they are represented, they basically end up making victim blaming more stronger in the cases of sexual assault. Also the institutional responses, it's basically is nothing but, as we discussed earlier, the legal responses that we see, the courtroom practices that there are, they tend to blame the victim only, and that is why victim blaming is prevalent. The next is victim blaming in domestic violence cases. So why victim blaming is prevalent in these particular cases, it's because of the gender roles and patriarchy that there is in the society. So because of gender roles, that women are required to be more submissive and modest, and that masculinity is basically something which is aggressive. So because of these gender roles and stereotypes, they put the blame of event negative event on their victims only. Next, it's cultural and religious beliefs. So even the cultural and religious beliefs make victim blaming stronger in the cases of domestic violence. Also the societal myths and stereotypes tend to increase victim blaming in the sexual assault cases. Next, we'll be talking about child abuse. So, victim blaming in child abuse cases, how the victim blaming is prevalent in these cases. This is because, first of all, questioning the child's credibility. So, whenever a child reports an assault, the first and foremost thing that the society or the parents or anyone does is that they question the child's credibility. If the child, whatever the child is telling them, is it even correct, is it right, they basically question their child's credibility. Next is that there is an adult authority in the cases of child abuse, and the person you know if a child has informed an adult, so there's an adult authority, and they had the authority to diminish the claims that are made by the child. Next is minimizing the abuse. So they also minimize the abuse which is faced by the child, um, by different statements that they tell the child to basically forget about it and stuff like that. The next one is cultural taboos and silence. So in the cultural taboos are basically when we talk about honor cultures. So basically they silence their victims of abuse in a way that protects their culture. So that is what cultural taboos and silence, how it basically uh, impacts the victim blaming, and it makes victim blaming more stronger in this case. And the last one is belief in mutuality. So when we talk about cases of child abuse, when both the perpetrator and the victim are minors, so there is a belief that it was mutual. So that is why that is how the victim blaming in child abuse is uh, prevalent. So this was about victim blaming in child abuse. Next, and the last one is victim blaming in marginalized groups, which is basically nothing but hate crimes in marginalized groups. So uh, hate crimes are basically criminal acts which are committed against people or group of individuals of a particular of a particular society, basically. Yeah. I'll read it. Hate crimes are criminal acts committed against individuals or group based on their actual or perceived membership in a particular social group. So that is what hate crimes are. So it can be, it is basically, influenced by prejudice, or yeah, it is highly driven by prejudice only. So first of all, I'll be discussing how, like, there can be marginalized identities in a society. So marginalized identities are based on race and ethnicity, religion, caste, sexual orientation, or gender identity. Because of these particular you know because of these different social groups, marginal identities can be there in the society. And any hate crime which is committed because of someone's race or ethnicity or someone's religion or someone's sexual orientation, that is considered as a hate crime. And what basically makes victim blaming prevalent in these marginalized groups, that is, the first one is racial stereotypes. Because of this racial stereotypes, because of the religious discrimination, because of homophobia and blame, transphobia and violence, and blame for non-conformity, because of these basically reasons, victim blaming is prevalent in these marginalized groups. Yeah, so this was about the marginalized groups. Next, I'll be talking about the language. Yeah, so this will be an informative session now, as it will basically explain how we as a society, how the media represents an assault, and how we need to change our language towards more accountability focused rather than victim blaming. Yeah. So language plays a powerful role in shaping how society perceives assault, and can either support survivors or contribute victim blaming. Yeah. So that is how language plays a powerful role. Like, an event has happened, and the how the media represents that event, it can automatically relate to if they are blaming the victim, or if they are holding the perpetrator accountable for what he has committed. The words and phrases used in everyday conversation, media reports, and legal discussions can subtly shift responsibility away from the perpetrator and onto the victim. So, we'll be discussing this with an example. So, the example is that Susan met Jack at a party. Jack gave Susan a spiked drink. Later on, Susan was assaulted by Jack. So, this is an example. This is basically an event which has happened, and this is basically a person explaining that event. Okay, so he explains in a way that Susan basically met Jack at a party. Jack gives Susan a spiked drink. Later on, Susan was assaulted by Jack. So try to understand this particular point, that all the blame of all the responsibility of the event which has happened, all of the things were put onto Susan. As Susan Yeah, Susan basically went to the party. Susan met Jack. Susan was assaulted by Jack. So all the responsibility put onto Susan. So this is basically how victim blaming language occurs, and how even the uh, you know in media, in the general conversations, how we basically blame the victim by putting the victim first. Next, we'll be changing this particular language, and we'll be understanding how we as a society can change the language that we use around assault. So, more accountability focused language can be about the same scenario. Let's take that Jack met Susan at a party. Jack gave Susan a spiked drink. Later on, Jack assaulted Susan. So now, as we read it, that Jack basically met Susan at a party. Jack gave Susan a spiked drink, and Jack is the only one who assaulted Susan. So all the responsibility of the act, all the authority, all the basically responsibility and the blame of that act is put on to Jack now. So that is how the language around assault can be more accountability focused if we put more pressure on what the perpetrator has done, and not on this on the victim. We will be discussing more these examples further now, how you know how we as a society use blaming language instead of accountability focused language. So the first one is that she was blamed. So this is basically again a blaming language To make it more accountability focused, we can use he raped her. Next is she should not have been drinking so much. So instead of this particular language, we can use more accountability focus, which is he should not have assaulted her regardless of her state. Next one is that boys will be boys. So instead of this particular statement, we can say harassment and assault are choices, not instincts. Next one is alleged victim claims she was assaulted. So this particular language is basically what we see in the media representations of an assault which has happened. So they claim the in statement, basically they write uh, in their reports, it's that alleged victim claims she was assaulted. So this is particularly this is basically a blaming language. To change this into more accountability focused language, they can use survivor reports and assault. So and the next one is it was just a misunderstanding. So this is again a blaming language, that we basically minimize the assault which has happened, and we just say that it was just a misunderstanding. So instead of this, we can say it was a violation of consent. Next, she did not fight back, so it could not it could not have been that bad. So this is again a blaming language, that if she had fought back, itna bura nahi hota. Instead of this, we can use lack of resistance does not mean consent. So the next one is why did they go to that party alone? This is again an incident had happened, and the person is saying why did they go to that party alone. So this is again a blaming language, as we are questioning what the victim did. So instead of this, we can use more accountability focused language, and we can say why did someone take advantage of them. So that is accountability focus. Next one is it wasn't that bad, others have been through worse. So this is another example ki when we are basically minimizing the trauma that the victim has faced, and we are saying that इतना भी कुछ बुरा नहीं था, लोगों ने like औरों ने और भी बुरा फेस कर रखा है. So this is victim blaming, and इसकी जगह पे we can use more accountability focused language, and we can say every form of assault is serious and unacceptable. Yeah, and the last one is that he should have known better than to walk home alone at night. So this is again blaming language. This is situational blaming, as we are blaming the person for walking alone at night. So iski jagah pe we can use more accountability focused language, and we can say people should be able to walk safely without fear of assault. So that is how the blaming language occurs, and like blaming language is there in the society, and how we as people who are now informed about victim blaming, we can use more accountability focused language. So I hope this particular topic was clear to you guys, how we can use more accountability focused language. Next, we will be moving forward to more examples of victim blaming. So the first person that we are going to discuss about is Bhavri Devi. So if anyone knows, otherwise I'll go. Anyone can, if they know.
सो बेसिकली भवरी देवी जो थी वो आई थिंक किसी पॉलिटिकल पार्टी से बिलोंग करती थी एंड शी वाज हैविंग अ बॉयफ्रेंड लाइक मुझे इतना कुछ आइडिया नहीं है ज़्यादा बट उसका रेप किया गया था एंड देन हर बॉयफ्रेंड आई मीन मर्डर्ड हर और उसके बॉडी को पीसेस में काट के कैनल में फेंक दिया था
Okay, no, that was not about what Bhavri Devi faced. So this is basically an example of Bhavri Devi from 1992. So she was basically a Dalit social worker from Rajasthan, and she was basically fighting for prevention of child marriages. So she was a social worker, and she was trying to prevent child marriages in the society, but she was gang raped by upper caste men as a punishment to stop child marriages. So this is what she faced. This was the act of violence, act of harassment, that basically assault that happened to her. But how she faced victim blaming is when the court the court dismissed the case, saying that upper caste men would not rape a lower caste woman. So that is how she faced victim blaming. And even her own community, her people from her own community blamed her for bringing shame upon them. So that is how she faced victim blaming. Next, we'll be talking about Nirbhaya from 2012. I hope most of you are aware. So, to make it quick, I'll just explain. Yeah, anyone? Yeah. Nirbhaya basically faced victim blaming as she was basically a 23-year-old woman, and she was gang raped by she was gang raped by she was basically faced victim blaming when some politicians and religious leaders blamed her, saying that she should not have been out that late at night, or basically good girls do not roam around at night. So this was basically a particular statement which was given by a famous politician, which is nothing but victim blaming, as she was blamed for being out at night. And some even suggested that her clothing or behavior provoked the assault. So that is how she faced victim blaming. Next, we'll be talking about Hathras gang rape victim. So she was basically a Dalit woman who was brutally raped and murdered by upper caste men in Uttar Pradesh. So this was the act which has happened. And how she faced victim blaming is when police initially denied that the rape has happened, and police forcibly cremated the body, basically victim's body, without her family's consent. And afterwards, politicians and media questioned her character, and also they reasoned it with the caste background instead of focusing on the justice. So that is how she faced victim blaming. So this was about the a few examples, like real life examples of victim blaming. Next, we'll be talking about rape culture. So is anyone here aware about what is rape culture? Anyone can explain? Okay. I'll take the silence as no. So basically, rape culture is sorry, eve teasing. Yeah, that is a part of rape culture. So rape culture is a basically it's a vast topic to be discussed here in this research. So we will be covering this particular topic in April, when R&D department is basically preparing an activity for everyone to understand what rape culture is and how as a society we can end rape culture. So to make you guys curious about it, be like we are just introducing this topic, that there will be an activity in April, so you all should join that activity to understand what rape culture is. Next, we'll be talking about prevention and intervention. So prevention and intervention is basic we can do basically by three aspects. The first one is obviously awareness. Awareness by educational programs. So educational programs are basically the play the major role in prevention and intervention of victim blaming. When we introduce topics related to sex education to young children, they get to know what is consent, what is going against the consent of people, and what is harassment. When they try to understand these topics, they basically tend to end the blaming the victim for the assault which has happened. And it also increases empathy in the children. So this was about education programs for the kids. The next one is we can also implement bystander intervention training. So this is basically a training which is given to the bystanders. Bystanders are basically anyone can be a bystander. Bystander is someone who is basically an observer of a negative event which is happening around them. So that person is called a bystander. And if if in society we encourage our bystanders to intervene in the negative event, we can reduce the impact which is there on victim, and they can basically do the direct intervention, as they can directly intervene in this situation which is happening, which is going around, and they can also intervene indirectly in a form of helping the victim, understanding the victim, and contacting authorities to provide support to the victims. So that is another training which we as a society can opt for to prevent victim blaming. Support services are basically the institutions or the people, authorities who are helping, who are the first person of contact when an assault has happened. Basically, the law enforcement, the police, and basically the healthcare providers. So we as a society can educate our professionals, educate these professionals, these law enforcement people, or and the healthcare providers, in a way that they don't blame the victim. And that is how support services can help in prevention of victim blaming. And the next one is media literacy. So this is a major, as we all discussed, how media reports the assault which has happened, how they you know explain the assault in a way which is basically blaming the victim. We need to provide support, provide education to media, like, so that they basically do not do it, and they use more accountability focused language while reporting an incident. So that is how prevention and intervention can happen and help us in reducing victim blaming. So that was all about the research on victim blaming and what are the findings on research on victim blaming. So that was it. If you guys have any questions related to any topics or being here till the end, whatever feedback you have for the of the presentation, you can give it. Any questions, anything you guys want to ask? Yes, Nikita.
Yeah, I think first of all, you covered it very beautifully, and a lot of points were quite new to me. But I think it was really nice to listen to everything. Learn the new
So
points here. Am I audible?
your voice is actually breaking, I guess. You're audible, but there's like a buzzing sound. If you can remove the earphones or something, if you've connected them.
Am I audible now? Is it fine now?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
you're audible now.
Okay, okay. So I just wanted to ask, like, you were mentioning about the blaming language that we often use. So,
Yeah,
I just noticed that, and I just realized, I think we use it very casually and unintentionally
yeah.
also. I just realized that. So, how can we really move to the accountability language? I think we just have to be more mindful.
Yeah, basically the first point is that like we obviously do it unintentionally, because the reporting and the media representations, obviously they report it in a way and you just explain it in that sense. But yeah, being mindful of the victim and also about the language that we are using, and with awareness, obviously we will be moving towards more accountability focused language.